Hi, I'm Dan Hannon, foreman at Kootenai Electric Cooperative, and you're listening to Electrification Unplugged.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Electrification Unplugged. I'm Melissa Newcomer, KEC's Manager, Member Experience.
And I'm Reed Christensen, KEC's Chief Operating and Financial Officer. Today we're going to be diving into the part of the utility industry that doesn't get the spotlight all that often, and that's utility planning. It's crucial to operating efficiently and avoiding risk.
And to help us understand that planning process a little better, we have our first podcast guest, and that is Michael Thomas, our Manager of Engineering. So welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
So utility planning includes several different planning efforts, things like load forecasting, our construction work plan, which Michael will talk to us about today, and more longer range plans. It also includes other types of planning like maintenance, financial forecasting, budgeting, and human capital planning, which is essentially making sure that we have enough skilled staff to carry all of the work from all of these plans out. So, Michael, talk to us about why we plan at all.
Well, you may not think about it at the moment, but when you drive past KC Crew putting up a new power line along the road or other work, you're not seeing just what's happening right then. You're seeing the final step of everything that's in the process.
Okay.
So that line they're installing, it's got to be out there for decades, facing really hot temperatures, really cold temperatures, winds, etc. So the design of materials that we are selecting really needs to be built tough and to last for decades to come.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but it's not just about durability. That line has to handle the electricity demands of today and tomorrow. It wouldn't make sense to build an expensive line now, only to upgrade it in a few years because the demand outgrew it. Now, on the flip side, it's also wasteful to overbuild something that you'll never be able to use to its full capacity.
Well, yeah, I mean, that line has got to be built in the right place at the right time with the right materials and size just right. And to pull all this off, we have to do some serious planning.
So let's talk about what goes into each one of these planning efforts and why they're necessary.
All right, well, let's start with load forecasting. It's really no surprise that our area is growing. And the reason why we load forecast is to really help us determine what our future power supply requirements are. I mean, Reed, you're involved in some load forecasting yearly, right?
Yep.
And then Michael, you have more of the sizing and locations of substations. So why don't you talk a little bit about why and how we need to do the sizing and location of substations? Why is that important?
So we are really looking at where these loads are going. So based on the developments coming into our area, we're able to identify areas where potential load's going to come up. And with that, we're able to determine what upgrades the system might need to take place to be able to handle that load on more of a individual versus system level design.
It doesn't do us any good if we build a substation in an area where we're not seeing any growth. It doesn't really help us in that localized area. We got to build it where the load is, right?
Exactly. And make sure our upgrades are going to be timely as well. If we think a development might happen, it would be in a longer range plan versus something with more certainty. We'll probably start developing sooner than later.
Sure. Now, just to give us an idea, how long does it take to build a substation from, it's not like we can just decide on a whim that we need to build one, right? It takes a lot of planning, and this load forecasting is a part of it, right?
Correct. It would take several years for us just to get some materials for a substation, let alone the design and making sure we have the, all of the assets and essentially making sure we have everything lined up and approved. Mm-hmm. And the material is a few-year process.
So that in itself has its own planning process. And then once we actually can break ground on an area, how long does that take?
Up to a year. Probably quickly 9 months or so would be accurate.
Okay. So again, just all another, example of why we need to do all of this load forecasting and planning, ahead of time so that when we do have the load that requires it, we can meet that demand.
Correct. And that 9 months is just for the substation itself. There may be other upgrades required to be able to get the power to, the end result, the end loads, then people, and users, members, et cetera.
So how far into the future do we look at for load forecasting?
When we're looking at load forecasting, it can be up to 10 years, can be beyond that. But honestly, there's you get in trouble if you look too far in the future.
Sure.
But you're always trying to hit that sweet spot of knowing, like, okay, where the load's going to be. And our engineering department does a great job of trying to figure that out.
You know, it kind of makes me wonder, like, if this is like a chicken or the egg situation. Like, is engineering using the forecasting, or is the forecasting using like data from engineering, or it's just really like a combination of both, right?
It's really a combination of all of our teams, I think, working together. And here at Kootenai, there are some members of our team that are actively figuring out where load is going. We're using that in the model of our system to see where everything should, any upgrades might need to happen, and ultimately the cost, et cetera, of doing said things and when the right time to do it is. I may go on a tangent here, a little bit of one, go in a different direction, but something that's important to realize here is with weather, we don't always have extreme heat or extreme cold on our system. And we may, have different areas with additional people moving in, maybe getting electric vehicles at their houses, et cetera. And we have to be mindful that we may not always have a negative 20-degree week out there, but when it does happen, we want to make sure people will still have power.
Right.
So, maybe this winter we won't have that. Maybe for the next 5-10 winters, we may not have that. But if there's any additional load coming on the system, we have to plan for that to make sure we are able to provide service to our membership.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I'm hoping we could talk a little bit more about it. And that is like the modeling. So what do you do to look at different scenarios when you look at utility modeling to see, can you predict that kind of stuff? Or not, sorry, not predict it, but like, can you play that out and see, like, could our system handle some of that stuff?
Basically, we have a really great mapping system here at Kootenai, and it's able to tell us where everything is and kind of what size of wire we have out there, et cetera. And we're able to take that and put it inside of a model. And that model will take our peak load over the last year and say it's a hot summer day or a cold. Did I say hot summer or cold winter?
Okay. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, whatever, one way or the other. So you have some really hot days, really cold days, and we'll take a snapshot of the system at that time, and we put it inside of our model, our tool, and we try to make sure, based on that, if everything currently is running up to standards, codes, et cetera. And then what we do beyond that would be to take areas where we know developments may be coming, where likelihood of new loads, sources,
Sure.
Even if we get some kind of a generation facility, et cetera, we're able to see where that stuff is going and able to put it in our map with the likelihood of it going on a certain year. So say you knew something was coming in 2028, we could put it in the model for 2028 and say, hey, we know at this location, we think this is going to happen with some certainty, and it's about this amount of load. We could put it in there for that year, and our model, et cetera, will be able to say, hey, we think we're going to have some overloaded wires, for example. It might be time to upgrade in the next couple of years. And also in the areas we don't know, based on historical performance, as well as where we think things may be built out or building out, we're able to kind of adjust on a case-by-case basis of saying, hey, we don't really anticipate much growth in this area. Maybe we aren't growing this particular area, but this other area is ripe for growth. And we have to maybe adjust the factor up a little bit higher in this area to say, hey, maybe this area might have a 3% gain versus a 0.5% or something.
So you can take like our past percentage growth and, forecast that out and say, okay, if we did nothing else to our system today, how long could the system, hold all of our load and everything? And then, obviously that's not realistic, but then be able to kind of go, okay, what are the areas that we really need to focus on, right? Because does it give you like, you can see which substations or which feeders and stuff are going to reach capacity first.
Exactly. And we have a process that goes through there where something isn't quite running to our standards. And we have a process of what is the most cost-effective means of a solution for that. So we'd go from something kind of basic. Maybe we can change the, one of three phases. We can move to a different phase, for example, might be really cheap for us to do. Does that buy us anything?
Right.
There's different solutions that are less costly, all the way to the most costly of needing a new substation, transmission line, et cetera. There's 8 or so steps between those points.
Right.
So we have to look at not only the next few years worth of what our expectations are, but try to look in that crystal ball for the next 8-10 years.
Yeah.
And say, hey, if we're going to touch this thing in the next year or two,
Yeah.
we really don't want to go back there
Sure.
in 5 more years and go do some other upgrades if we are, fairly confident that's going to happen in the next 10 years.
Okay.
So we're really looking at long-term solutions with these and not just a short-term Band-Aid.
One of the things that I've witnessed as I've worked more closely with you from the financial aspect is I feel like the engineering group is always taking in information almost on a daily basis. Things are shifting and, where they're building and also just that's just the nature of it. And what I've really liked in how you guys operate is you're always looking for the most cost efficient way.
Mm-hmm.
You just put together your construction work plan, which is like a 4 to 5 year window of planning in terms of how much you're going to have to rebuild certain transmission lines or substations or whatever it may be. And you weren't afraid to, right after you were done, to jump in and say, this is actually a better idea if we move forward with this. And you amended the construction work plan. And so I can see the focus of your group always looking at how can we do things more efficiently in the least costly way possible. So as a finance guy, I appreciate that because I'm always thinking on that end.
Well, and one thing I think we want to keep in mind too is that cost effective, right? That's not always going to mean the cheapest today, right? Because as Michael, as you mentioned, like we don't want to just have a really short-term fix if we know we're going to have to come right back here and then spend even more money on it. But it's like, how do you, that's got to be a tough balance to go, do we do the, least expensive today, or do we do what's going to last, for decades, right? Because we don't want to just keep coming back to the same areas and go, well, we did this a few years ago and, now we've got to, put more infrastructure in.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance that we're doing. Something that we're doing here at Kootenai that's maybe a little more unique is that every year as our budget process is going along, we are actually looking at the next year's plans again, making sure those are the right plans we're doing next year.
Sure.
And, maybe based on how things are developing out there in the actual real world, maybe a project can get pushed to a future year and maybe a different project needs to go into next year.
Yeah.
So we really are looking at the system every year, making sure these are the right projects at the right time to really minimize those costs and be most effective. And at that point, where if we do need to do that job, that's really where we're looking into that. Hey, does this need to be maybe a little bit different to make sure it lasts for those 10 plus years without having to go back? Or do we think it's just, this is great, this should last us for a while, this, this minor change or upgrade? Yeah,
that's really smart. I mean, it is a 5-year plan, right? Mm-hmm. But it sounds like it's kind of like renewed and updated annually with any other, any changes that we're seeing, on the system or in areas that are growing. I don't know what the model looks like, but I will tell you the image I have in my head is like some sort of Sim City vibes. So like I hope someday I can actually see the model because that's what I have in my head.
I wish it was like that. That'd be amazing. Get the little monster in there, getting everything. Yeah.
Well, we kind of talked through the construction work plan, and just out of curiosity, like approximately how many projects do we anticipate, going into next year? I mean, I know we kind of have what we'd like to get done, and but just give us a little bit of an overview on what that looks like.
There's a large quantity of projects for next year. It might be the largest quantity Kootenai has ever had on our list versus prior years, and it's near 100 different projects just for the main line.
Give us an example of like one like what do you mean when you say a project? What's a project you could tell us just a little bit about?
There may be very minor projects. There's several that are increasing the size of a voltage regulator. So we'll have crews go out there, some big devices hanging on the poles out there that regulate voltage, and it may need to get to a bigger size because of the amount of current that's going through the system. So some of those are minor. They may be they're not inexpensive, but they don't take a lot of time. So there's some low hanging fruit like that. There's other projects that might involve a new feeder tied to another area. It could be multiple miles worth of replacing line. Some might go overhead, underground, depending on fire resiliency. depending on cost effectiveness, et cetera. And, a lot of these projects are based on reliability and trying to, for example, the new Bakel substation really helps us out when we get all of our feeder ties and that substation is energized and feeding load. If we do have an issue at one of our northern substations, it should be able to pick it up without any issue. And potentially, if we have a transmission line issue, it might be able to pick up a couple different substations at times of the year. So it's really about making those upgrades at the right time. So these projects can vary widely in breadth and depth.
So when you talk about picking up other load, like you mean during power outages, right?
Correct. It could be minor things, power outages where maybe a tree fell on the line and some line fell down, but something kind of, a pole gets hit, a cross arm or something breaks on the pole. It could be relatively minor all the way to the source of our substation going down. If there's a problem on that transmission line, whether it's KEC owned or not, that does affect us at times. And we're looking at contingencies continually to say, hey, if there is an issue and we lost this ability to serve normally, can we do it a different way? And that is a very important part of this role, to make sure people aren't out for days at a time, if not weeks, to fix the power or some kind of issue, transmission line wise, et cetera.
Right. So if we have a substation or a feeder or something go down on our system for whatever reason, having those members off that line just hang on until we're able to get all the work done. And it's the goal, right? In a lot of these situations, to be able to switch the feed of the load and be able to bring those members back on through power from a different substation or a different feeder, or even a different transmission system if that's what was needed.
Exactly. Where if we can take something that would 12-hour long outage for a big number of people, there may be some people out for a full 12 hours are close to the problem. But if we can, get power back on in a matter of a couple hours, everyone else, that's the ideal scenario.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the engineering team's got a lot of planning. A lot of planning that's gone into this, a lot of planning still to do. And I mean, I don't know when you guys find other time to do other work. Sounds like you guys spend a lot of time planning, but there's a lot of thought. It's like, we don't just make all these decisions on a whim and, without really trying to make sure it's the most cost effective that it can be. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well summed up.
Yeah. Good work.
All right, let's shift gears slightly and talk about some of the other types of planning we do. First, I'm going to talk about maintenance planning. This is equally as important. So Michael talked a lot about the planning that goes into the construction work plan, and that takes years to do. It wouldn't make any sense for us to just ignore what we have built.
Right.
There's things that need to be maintained. We have all sorts of issues that can happen on a line. And so we have to systematically go through our electrical system and maintain it. And that takes a lot of effort. We also live in a beautiful area, lots of trees. Those trees need to be maintained as well from our right-of-ways. So we have a vegetation management plan.
Truthfully, like each one of these system maintenance and vegetation management, we could have a whole podcast episode on each one of those, and maybe we will in the future, with some guests from our operations department. These plans also have to be executed and carried out properly to where we are taking good care of this amazing investment we made of constructing this line.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense for us not to do that. And then there's another aspect of planning, and that's financial planning. Like any good company, we have to do our financial planning.
Reed's wheelhouse.
Yes, that happens to be where I've spent a lot of time. So when Michael talked about the construction work plan, and they do up to a 10-year plan, so we take that information and look out into the future, see what our needs are going to be, and plan ahead. We use banks that we borrow from. Most of our loans are 30-year loans, and the advantage to that is the person who's benefiting today from, let's say we build a new substation, that substation is going to be there for decades. Mm-hmm. So the person that comes on the line in year 29 is also going to be paying for a portion of that substation based on the fact that we've spread those costs out through the loan.
Yeah.
And we'll do a whole other podcast on the financial aspects of the cooperative. It's rather unique, but also really the focus of financial forecasting is to make sure that we don't have any surprises for our members in the future.
Wow.
And then we have the whole human capital planning. And this is just to make sure our workforce is properly sized, the workers we do have are adequately skilled, and that also we prepare succession planning. So we have usually a retirement every year, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a planning effort that takes place to make sure that we have staff to replace those who are retiring. We do leadership development plans. We have training plans. We also have a compensation analysis that we do every year because we're trying to make sure that we're paying at market. And all of that takes a lot of effort. So a lot of planning here.
Yeah.
From the construction side, from the design side. And then after that, we still have to maintain it. We have to make sure that it's being paid for, that we can pay for that, and that we have the people to support it.
Yeah, there's a lot of plans. And I think, one of the morals of this whole story is that, like, we don't make any of these decisions lightly. There's a lot of effort that goes into it to try to make sure we've got the members' best interest at heart. We are looking at, the 3 tiers of our mission statement of, providing exceptional service and reliable power at competitive rates. And all of these plans really help make sure that those 3 legs of the mission statement stool are in balance. And so, and really then behind the scenes too, there's a whole lot of other planning that we haven't even talked about today that is just as important, but all crucial elements of, what we do here at Kootenai Electric on behalf of the members.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway that we want to leave with our listeners is nothing about utility operations is random.
No.
Planning is in our DNA. It has to be, because when we planning falls short, the consequences can be serious. We can have outages, there's unnecessary costs, even safety risks. That's why we take it so seriously.
Yeah, that's right.
So next time you see a new power line going up, just know it's not just a construction project. This has been years in the making.
Thank you, Michael, for being a guest on the podcast today. I hope you've enjoyed it with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to Electrification Unplugged. Be sure to subscribe so you can be notified of future episodes covering different topics of the electric cooperative world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay plugged in to the amazing world of electricity.